you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. I'm your boy Abram, joined as usual by Andrew, and we are here for what I'm calling the unofficial quote-unquote season 2 of my Star Wars show. But Andrew, before we properly get into today's episode, a little bit of an ephemeral topic for you. I'm quite excited to chat about it. I want to tell you how to chat with us about Star Wars, and the way you do that is by checking out the link to our description as usual, top of the description right down there. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, leave a comment, surprise me in how you decide to engage with BLB content. That's what I want you to do. But Andrew, we are here today joined in wonderful celebration of what I think is a very peculiar and exciting element of the Star Wars universe, and that is aliens. Because Andrew,
Absolutely.
Contrary to what the protagonists of these shows and films and books and games and everything might have you believe, Star Wars is not just about the human characters. In fact, I might even argue, Andrew, that Star Wars might even be more about those non-human characters. And I want to talk about them and why they're important, and why I think, and I think you agree, that we need more of them kind of at the forefront of our Star Wars storytelling. But Andrew, where do you want to start us?
I mean, when I think of yeah, you're right. When you think of Star Wars, you'd automatically think of our very Caucasian, blonde, cisgender male
Our
protagonists, the Skywalkers, and okay, Rey too, right?
Sure.
Rey. Now we think of Rey too and stuff, but like,
Yeah.
I mean, before we started recording, I was thinking about like what was that one episode of Star Wars Visions that really stood out to me, and it was La Pinocho,
Yeah.
where it's the only, I think, episode of the anthology in most Star Wars media where like the main character is humanoid but not a human, and that's of course Lop, right, the little bunny girl character. And I was like, that was fun. We should have way more of that kind of stuff. And I mean, like, it can kind of get nitpicky, right? There's like droids, like the Star Wars droids, and like things like that where we see through like the computer like kind of lenses.
Yeah.
But other than that, we don't see like a Twilight show or a Zabrak show or like other stuff like that. And you would think, for especially now how Star Wars is doing like the very embracing diversity kind of thing, we don't really have diversity in terms of species.
Yeah.
And that's something that's kind of been, you would think, with like the galaxy full of all these different races and all these different species of aliens, like we just always see things through human lenses. And I feel like that's kind of limiting a bit.
Yeah, I agree too, because Star Wars to me at its core is all about the imagination of the universe. I love how imaginative Star Wars is. And I think that we could be even more imaginative if our stories weren't filtered through these same eyes, as we're saying, right? Yeah. I think you make a really good point about Star Wars kind of pushing for more diversity, and I think that's really fantastic.
Right.
And it's aligned in a way that's reflective of the people watching it, which obviously makes sense, right? It's more racially diverse and everything. So Star Wars fans can feel represented by the brand and included by the brand. And that is obviously like the premier version of, inclusivity and diversity you ought to be pushing in the characters you create. But then I think you're right. There's also like an in-universe sense of diversity that I think we could work on more, which is, as you're saying, the sort of diversity of species. Because it's one of the reasons I love, for instance, Star Wars Rebels, because in that ensemble cast, you have all kinds of cool people. You got Hera, right? And next to Hera, you have Zeb. And then you got Chopper, right? And it's cool seeing these characters from different walks of the in-universe life come together and interact that way. I think that's part of why Han and Chewie's dynamic is so fun, right? If Chewbacca was just another dude, they would still have cool banter, but part of the fun of their relationship, I think, is that Chewbacca is a big fucking tall Wookiee, right? And you don't know what he's saying. I think that is super important to what makes that relationship tick.
You're right. I think like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think when I think of Han and their dynamic between Han and Chewie, like, you don't know what he's saying, but then like Han kind of fills you in. It's like, of course, I think this is good. Okay, so we know what Chewie was saying. Yeah. Or like, I think of sometimes we don't know exactly what the jokes are, right? Like I'm trying to remember when he reunites with Chewie in the cells beneath Jabba's palace, right? Like where he's like blind, he's like covering for the hibernation sickness. and he just hears Chewie, and he's like, Luke did what? And you're like what do you say? He's like, oh, like I'm gone for a couple of minutes, and Ariel has delusions of grandeur, and like he's updating him on like everything he's missed out since he's been frozen.
Yeah.
And like you don't know what he's saying, but you kind of your mind fills in the gaps, right? Your mind fills in the gaps for what's like. He's like, Luke, so what? A Jedi Knight? Like, oh, that's like when he's like so like that. Those are fun. Like where it wouldn't be the same kind of dynamic, I think, if he was just speaking English, right? It kind of just be like throwaway lines and whatever. But because you have to kind of not work at it, but you kind of have to fill in the gaps a little bit. Like he's saying what? It reminds me of when I translate sometimes for my friends, and because I speak Spanish and English, obviously, and so English, obviously, and so when I have to translate, like what, what did they say? I understood that, like I heard this bit of a word, and I kind of have to like, well, this is what happened. They're like, oh, okay, like it's confusing, but I think it's also for a more comedic and richer kind of interaction.
Yeah.
So I love that dynamic that Han and Chewie have, and I'm glad, like if you've ever seen like the old like behind the scenes, where Chewie just kind of has like a very normal voice, and they're like this doesn't work. Like we should like dub it with some animal sounds. I'm like, that was a good choice.
Yeah, because I think as the viewer, it kind of evokes that feeling of creativity and a sort of awe that the Star Wars universe is kind of a weird place, right? And so if we're talking about the original trilogy and Aliens in the original trilogy, I think we got to go back to the Mos Eisley Cantina.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
Yes, which I think is a really important part of this conversation. And I think, the aliens aren't super bizarre, right? Like by the time we get to Kenobi, I love that big fucking shaggy guy that young Leia runs into. Star Wars aliens get crazy. But we arrive in the cantina, right? And they're very humanoid, but they're still so peculiar. Like we see, I forget what his name is, but the Aqualesh guy who's there, the ones that start harassing Luke at the bar. Yeah. We see him, of course. We've got the Max Rebo band. Everyone's there hanging out, right? It's all so cool.
Myths, yeah.
Yeah, and as a viewer, you're like, wow, this is a weird place. You almost start to like, because Luke's random fucking farm boy, right? He interacts with a Jawa here and there, a droid here and there. He hears these stories of the Tusken Raiders, but all of a sudden, him and the audience are in this just weird place full of these eclectic creatures. And I think that was a really important moment for the overall franchise, where it kind of highlighted one of the ways that Star Wars to me feels so distinct amongst sci-fi, which is just the weirdness of its creatures and the ways they all interact and are thrown into these mixing pots like the Mos Eisley Cantina. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, you just touched on it real quickly, that the Aqualish, like that whole confrontation goes down because Luke doesn't understand what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
He's like mumbles something, and Luke like looks at him like, okay, like whatever. And the guy's like, he doesn't like you. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. He's like, I don't like you either. Like it's the whole loss, like the translation issue is what causes that whole like negative interaction to go down. And like we wouldn't have that if they were just speaking what they call galactic basic, right?
Yeah.
So you're right. I think we see like the Cantina band, and we see the Ithorians, like in the corners of the Ithorian with like the hammerhead, and like just I think if you were to see just all humanoid, like humans, like you wouldn't get that sense of like how vast physically and also like racially, I guess we go with that.
Yeah.
How vast the Star Wars universe is, right? Because like I just finished watching not Rebels, I'm sorry. Don't get excited. Bad Batch, right? And they visit the Twilight homeworld of Ryloth. And it's like, oh, okay, so this is like where they come from. And you kind of have like this, you're introduced to these different species and races all have like different roles in society. Where like, if you think about Twilight, the first thing that pops to me is the one that Jabba has, like his like slave girl, right?
Yeah.
And in pretty much in the Star Wars universe, like even if you go back to Knights of the Old Republic, KOTOR, like most Twilight women are kind of seen as like exotic and like almost like not sort of like beneath. Like there is a sense of like hierarchy in the Star Wars world. And sometimes like you can see like, oh, like it's very classist, or it's like in that case like racist, right? With like the Twi'leks and stuff. And so seeing like how on Ryloth, how they're doing great, they're like, they're like a very strong society, but like in the hierarchy of like the rest of the Republic or now the Empire, it's like, no, like they see as like lower or like beneath. And like you can't really, I mean, you could get that with humans, but that's just too real. So let's not do that. But like I think all that extra subtle like layers of having all these races interact with each other. And like, I mean, if you're out, Abram, tell me if you remember this. There's a specific NPC in KOTOR that you run into. He has like it's two heads and make up one body. It's like a big head and a small head, like in a cantina. And they speak at the same time. And it's weird. And it's like, what is it? Like your character asks, like, what is your name? He's like, oh, you cannot pronounce our name it can only be pronounced by two mouths speaking at the same time.
Oh, cool.
And I was like 13 or 14 when I played that. I'm like, wow, like that's so cool to run into like something that's like even if it's organic, doesn't mean like it behaves the same way as like a normal or as perceived normal human would be. And it's like not being able to say the name properly because you lack two mouths. Or like Ithorians, like the Jedi Ithorian who has like that, like the blasting neck throat thing. Like it's just like adds extra layers of coolness that would be just so bland with just humans.
Yeah, and he's actually an interesting one to bring up because a lot of the aliens we meet in Star Wars are super humanoid, right? And he is too, but he is decidedly inhuman in a really interesting way. I love seeing him just like shred the Magna Guards through like the pure like force he can emit from his throat, right? Mm-hmm. That's super interesting because another alien I love is Maz Kanata. I love when we meet Maz Kanata in Force Awakens and we arrive in her castle and she's adjusting her big like built-in lenses. Glasses, and she's in love with Chewbacca. I love all that stuff. But ultimately, Maz Kanata is basically just like a person, but she's an alien, which sounds contradictory, but you know what I mean. Like
I get what you're saying.
The humanoid, very, very clearly, very humanoid. But when we start to track off that path a little bit, I think we find really interesting stuff like that Jedi Knight. And I really like that. Now that's harder to center a storyline around, obviously, because then who is even related to your protagonist and how they can communicate fully and what's really the thrust there. You could do something very interesting, maybe like Star Wars Visions, and exploring a super non-human alien in that realm, and a little shorts realm makes sense. Mm-hmm. But when we get further away from humans, even though it's harder for the storytelling, I think that's when it gets really, really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. My viewing of things is a little narrow, where I guess you're right. Ultimately your audience has to relate to the character, and I guess if you just stray too far away from a human kind of like blueprint, it gets a little bit harder. Have you ever encountered any of the Shadows of the Empire like media, whether it's comics, game, or
I haven't
book? Okay, so in the Shadows of the Empire, like the main antagonist is Prince Zizor, who he's like a green alien. But his species he's a Falleen, which is like it's the name of the species. But he has like a very special ability that Falleen have, and that's like they have really strong pheromones. And so what he does is he basically tries to he's like a cartel leader. He works for like the Empire. He's in competition with Darth Vader, actually, which is it makes an interesting dynamic for the Emperor. And he basically tries to seduce Leia through this use of like just having her in his presence for as long as possible. And he's like trying to like extract like rebel secrets from her. And it's just like it's interesting that because Falleen are kind of rare in the galaxy, she doesn't know this, but she just feels like there's something really compelling about this guy. And at first it's like, oh, is it like is he using the Force? And it's like, no, it's just his body just emits pheromones. And so there's like really cool things where they have like interesting effects on other people. If you've read any of the older expanded universe stuff, there's a creature that basically nullifies the Force, which is a really cool thing. They call it like Isilomari. It's like a rodent kind of. Cool. And so what they like there's certain Star Wars stories where like there's like gang leaders who keep these creatures around them because they're basically like Jedi repellent kind of. And so like there's like so much like there's so many like rich details for like making like interesting stories, or being like, like this counters that kind of thing, or like, oh, this doesn't work. Like think of Watto, right? Like I'm what's he say, a Trandorian? No, Trandoshian.
Toydarian.
Right? He's like Jedi. He's like Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Only money, right? So we're introduced to like, oh, like the Force can't always be the get out of jail free card. Like sometimes you're like, okay, like we have to like, you know what I mean? Like it's those kind of things that I think makes for interesting storytelling because you're forced to work within the confines of the rules that you're being presented with. And that stuff is like all over Star Wars. Like I haven't seen everything in because I know Rebels, there's like these giant force creature things. I can't remember what they're called, but I know I know that's a thing, right? They kind of introduce Ezra to like other concepts and stuff, but like there's just so much dope stuff in Star Wars that it's like in real life too. Like, I mean, if you imagine everybody was just one race, like how boring would that be? How boring would all the cultures of the world be? It's like the diversity is important, not just for the sake of not just for fun, but also just for the sake of the species. I think you have people who are more prone to certain things, and like the aliens in Star Wars are kind of like that, where you have the Twi'leks with like the twin brain kind of things with the Lekus, and then some of them it's cool. Like some of them are actually cross compatible with other races. So like it's really cool. I love the species of Star Wars. There's so much cool stuff.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about like what these various species add to the sort of interplay of various characters in the universe. So I think what you're thinking of, and I just had to double check the names, the Purgil, they're these large like whale looking guys here. This is not going to be very good for our new audio listeners, but we can see one of them right there. They're like,
okay, yeah.
There he is. Yeah, they're like these cool whales, and they can travel through hyperspace, and Ezra uses the Force to connect to them. And I think it's really interesting to use these aliens like almost like a foil to explore an idea like the Force. You know, Ezra certainly could, you could write a different way for him to use the Force in a more traditional way and solve a problem, right? Mm-hmm. But you can also use these aliens like the Purgils as an opportunity to really explore how interesting and interconnected everyone is through the Force. Because obviously you can't make the Purgil show. Because the main character is going to be this big whale, like just boom, jumping through hyperspace, making whale noises for like 90 minutes doesn't make any sense. But as this cool guy that Ezra meets, and then it becomes sort of like another instance of how amazing the Force is. That's super cool, and that's a sort of storytelling moment that I want to see more of from Star Wars, because it's like connecting the mysticism with the really imaginative alien races, and you land someplace in the middle, and I love when Star Wars is right there.
Yeah, I mean, think of is arguably the most mysterious character of all that we all know, and that's pretty much Yoda, right?
Yeah.
We have no idea what his species is. It's never mentioned. In fact, they go to great lengths to never reveal what his actual race is. And it's like you wouldn't be able to have a character like Yoda as a human because he is ancient. He's like 990 plus years, and it's like he has almost a millennia of knowledge of just wisdom, and it's like you could not do that with an actual just like a human being basically in that place. So like Yoda, and then of course we can get into like how you got to sell those toys. Everyone got to sell those toys, right? Yes. So you got to have a rich, diverse cast of characters to all the stormtrooper variants, all the clone trooper variants, right? All the race variants, right? So you got to have all this stuff, but like now we have Grogu, right? Grogu's kind of superseded Yoda in that place of like the cute whatever mysterious alien that is, right? And I mean, all those things just add further like enrichment to Star Wars. And I think like, for example, how like Rey and the other characters, they just know what droids are saying, even though it just sounds like complete nonsense, just beeps and boops. And it's like, because they believe it, like you believe it too as the audience member. And so I lost my train of thought after Yoda, but essentially like all the cool things from Wampas and Tauntauns and like all this cool stuff, all these cool alien races, it kind of just lets your like your imagination just feels like what is Hoth like when the rebels aren't around? Like what's that ecosystem like? You know what I mean? What is the freaking Sarlacc pit? Like that thing doesn't move, it just stays there forever and things just fall in, and like that's somehow like that's a creature. And I love the scavenger culture of the Jawas, and they're just like Utini, and they're just like scavengers and hustlers, and like there's like everyone in the Star Wars universe has like a role, and if they don't have like a specific role, they're like free to do whatever they want. For example, like Zabrax, right? Like they're on Iridonia, and they have like their thing where they're like, if you read any of like the expanded universe stuff, they're like very hard-headed, and I don't mean just literally, I mean like figuratively, they're hard-headed. Like they don't like being told what to do, so they tend to be like sometimes like they're like Jedi, where like they're kind of independent masters, or like they're like smugglers or bounty hunters. Like each of these like different races has like a set culture. Like we're kind of going to see that soon with the Star Wars short of the Ahsoka, like when she's like a baby, but like her race, I can never pronounce the name. It's like I want to say Tortuga, but I know that's not right.
Yeah.
But they come from like a very naturey mountainous forest system, and like a lot of like their culture, the way they're like, there is a whole culture already like structure around that. Like you read like like some of like the expanded material, and it's just like you could not get that again if they were just humans, because it would just be boring, right? I mean, Mandalorian culture is pretty cool, even though they are humans. But there is like, I mean, that's a whole separate topic. It's a little separate thing, but yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
I really like your point about like the ecology, right? I think that's super interesting. The idea of like, as you said, what is Hoth like when the rebels aren't there, when we're not focused on Echo Base, you know? And it's something that I would love to see Star Wars explore like on Disney Plus. I think, you know, a streaming show would be super cool. Imagine basically like a David Attenborough documentary, but of any of these planets. How cool would that be, right? And
the Porgs, like he's just observing the Porgs and like, oh, like here, like I can't do a good British voice, but just imagine like a Porgs documentary.
I would love that. There was which I was super disappointed by. There was, I forget what it was called. It was called like Star Wars Landscapes or something. Which they released on Disney Plus, but it's basically just like B-roll of flying over planets, which is neat. But I was hoping it was going to be, as you're saying, we arrive on Octo and we're just like watching the Porgs and we're talking about, and here we have the Porgs in the natural habitat, and here to catch.
That's really good.
You know, imagine you're just watching. We're sitting back. We're not here to review Kenobi. We're here to review a 90-minute show about a Porg like catching fish. It sounds boring, but when you really delve into it, it could be so amazing, because as we're kind of exposing this hidden level of imagination complexity to the Star Wars universe that's brought in by all of these weird like tertiary characters that are just kind of existing in the background. Womp rats, for instance, like what are they up to? You know, it'll be so cool getting to explore these little nooks and crannies.
Yeah, I mean, I think of right now when you mentioned that, I think of how a lot of the prior to actually seeing like Kashyyyk, a lot of like the old Star Wars expanded universe described Kashyyyk as like they lit, like the Wookiees live in the trees, and like in the lowlands, like no one goes to the lowlands because it's like dark and dangerous and you don't know what's in there. Or also like in KOTOR, right? I think one of the worlds in KOTOR is Kashyyyk. Yeah. And like when you go to the lowlands, like there's like a rich history of like, no, like Wookiees have like not evolved, but they've kind of as a society decided like we were staying in the trees. The lowlands is full of predators. Like we don't go there. Like that's just, it's like the shadowy place in the Lion King, right? You must never go there, kind of thing. And it's like your mind, like they just flesh this galaxy out. And I think like Tatooine, and like when you hear like when C-3PO and R2-D2 land in the escape pod, right? And then like when C-3PO is on the horizon, you see this long like skeleton of like some like long dead. I mean, it's a crate dragon skeleton, but you wouldn't know that the first time you watched it, right? Yeah. But just like as a kid, I'm like, what was that creature? Like you just see like these little long like skeleton of like some kind of large like dragon looking thing, and it's like what is that? And then how like again back to the Jawas and their giant mobile fortress thing, the sandcrawler. And it's like they just scavenge. They're just scavengers. That's all they're ever going to be. And like, that's just their thing. Or like Tusken Raiders, or of course, Tusken Raiders, like what's underneath all those layers of bandages. And I mean, spoilers, they're humans. They're basically humans. But there's like all these things. I remember when I was a kid, I also thought that just like how a lot of people thought that Ewoks were just baby Wookiees, basically.
Yeah.
And I thought that was cute. And like, I mean, it's kind of silly. Like I know you love Return of the Jedi, and I love Return of the Jedi too, but it's kind of silly when you think about like how much of that movie revolves around these little cuddly teddy bears fighting against this advanced empire thing. And that's the kind of stuff you can only get away with Star Wars. Like you can't, like I think in any other series or whatever, it's just not as believable. Maybe Star Trek, it just wouldn't be as believable, I think. And I just this Star Wars universe is so rich, and I wish they expand more so much on not just the stuff they introduce, but also like you said, like we need to have like those narratives like from their point of view, like what is life in the universe when you're not just a normal human. You
know, the Ewoks is an interesting direction to take this conversation in, actually, because very transparently, George Lucas was open about this. The Ewoks were there to sell toys. The Ewoks were redesigned to be cuter, so people would be attracted to them, and you would buy stuffed Ewoks. In a very cynical, reductive sense, that was part of the motivation behind that character. And it's undeniable that Star Wars certainly tried and then continue to try and recapture the sense of like, what is the new mascot? It's almost like how every Pokemon generation has its version of Pikachu. It feels like so many Star Wars films have to have their cute thing, right? And merchandise, I think, plays a huge role in a lot of these species, right? You know, you got something like Bosk. Bosk is just a fucking badass, right? And you want a Bosk figure because Trandoshans are awesome, right? But when you think about the Star Wars stuff that really rises to the top, like what's the most iconic Star Wars material, right? Maybe you have the insignias. You might see a bunch of insignias of the rebellion and the Empire on people's bumper stickers, right? Or you'll see.
That's what you mean. Yeah.
Like a stormtrooper helmet or the Death Star or things, right? Very, very iconic imagery, right? But a lot of times the most ubiquitous Star Wars iconography and characters are the cute aliens. And I think cuteness is an important facet of this conversation, right? Because the Ewoks, obviously, right? But then the Porgs, but most recently, Grogu. I think Grogu is really a fascinating character because when you go into Target and you're looking at just Star Wars merchandise, a disproportionate amount of it is Grogu.
Like BB-8 or something.
Oh yeah, BB-8, Grogu, particularly nowadays. You go into that aisle and there's just it's Grogu shirts and it's stuffed Grogus you can buy, and little ones that talk when you touch them and everything, right? There is, as much as there is like a creative motivation behind the aliens, there's also a very cynical monetary motivation behind them too. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but I think it's important to recognize and discuss a little bit the role that these play in just marketing Star Wars.
No, you're right. I mean, I remember when we I've talked about this before on this show where we talked about how at Target, when they had that midnight launch, not midnight launch, but it was like a launch of like all this toys from Force Awakens. Yeah. It's like every single variation of a first order trooper, the flamethrower one, the shock trooper, the one with the shock baton, like every variation was like a toy, either Black Series or like a pop, those little Funko Pops or something. Like nothing was missed. Everything got a Maz Kanata, like everything, any variation basically of any trooper was a toy in some form. Because my friend Miko, he actually collects a lot of those. He still has a lot of the pyro. I don't know if it's called like a flame trooper, pyro trooper, the shock one. There was another one. I'm trying to remember. Like sometimes they just have like the markings are different, and there's like not even like a big difference, like weaponry wise. Yeah. And it's like they just went overboard with that. And then also I think of how we have with your beloved Clone Wars, right? All those Rex, Cody, anyone, even like right? She has like her own battalion of like clone troopers that have like her markings on them. Like there's just like they just went like it's like power, like Red Ranger, Blue Ranger, they kind of just did that basically. Yes. And it, like I mean, I don't think they've ever made it a secret. They've never been like coy about it. It's always been kind of very blatant. But I think at the same time, like it does serve a secondary purpose where it does make you feel like this universe is much more populated than it really is. And I think for story purposes, I love seeing that. Watching many spoilers, but watching Bad Batch and seeing returning older clone characters. And it's like, oh yeah, like this is like so-and-so from Clone Wars. And it's like, oh yeah, they would have camaraderie because they're both, clones that from the same part of the same faction and everything. And I think it's blatant, but yeah, I think it's one of those things like I'm going to voice what's his name, his character from Wall Street, where greed is good sometimes because it does enrich, right? If nobody wanted the stuff, they wouldn't buy it, Abram. So there you go. Yeah, this at risk of just derailing the conversation entirely, I was listening to Last Stand Media, their review of episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. Colin Moriarty and his brother Dagan were reviewing it, and they really don't like that movie at all. I think they're completely wrong about it. But one of the points they raised, which I fundamentally disagreed with very early on, is the idea that like they're watching the Coruscant battle as it begins,
and seeing all of these, because there's a lot of new ship designs for Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
The prequels on the whole add a lot. And then there's actually a lot of interesting aliens we can talk about that come out of the prequels. But that Revenge of the Sith battle, they're saying, we see like the firefighter ship, and we see all of these different permutations of CIS vehicles and Republic vehicles and everything.
That dope dragonfly looking one from the Wookiee set. I love that thing.
Well, see, what they were saying is that it felt like they was just there to sell toys. Like it was overcomplicated and there's too many things and it's just here to sell toys.
Okay.
The Battle of Hoth is there to sell toys.
That's fair.
Because you got to be fair about these things, right? If you say the Battle of Coruscant, these things have a purpose, right? But we never see Hoth until Empire Strikes Back begins. And all of a sudden, we're here to see a bunch of vehicles that literally basically never appear again, right? The vehicles aliens never fucking seen again, right? The snow speeders, other than funnily like Kenobi and some various random appearances, the snow speeders and the AT-ATs are here solely for that sequence and then to be sold as toys. And so I think that it's a reductive criticism of Star Wars to say that, oh, these things are just here to sell toys, right? It's undeniably a facet of why things happen.
Right.
I don't think the Porgs are as cute as they are, they don't have eyes as big as they do, and are as prominently featured in humorous sequences just to be there, right?
They really don't serve a purpose, but yeah.
They're there so people buy Porgs. They're there so you go into Target and you buy a little Beanie Baby Porg or whatever, right? But at the same time, it's also fun that Octo is full of like alien nuns and Porgs. That's cute. That's fun.
And green milk sea cow things.
Yes. It's this. There's nothing, in my opinion, inherently wrong with constructing vehicles, Ewoks, whatever, with a clear monetary purpose in mind, because they, as you're saying, fill out and enrich the universe.
I mean, Abram, you didn't even mention the most, I think, arguably in my view, the most blatant one. That is the many TIE variants. Which Lord knows there's at least like 20 plus TIE variants. Yeah, TIE Interceptor, TIE Defender, TIE Fighter, TIE Advanced TIE. Oh, I love the TIE Bomber. So cool. Like there's like so many like, and they kind of just, I mean, they do have roles, right? There's like, you have your offensive one, they have roles, right? But like, you don't need that many TIE variants or like that many, all the alphabet ships, right? But like it's just so cool that they exist. I mean, I mean, there's nothing wrong, like you said. Yeah, it's reductive to be like you don't need all these things. I mean, they could have used X-wings on Hoth if they wanted to, although I guess they would be lacking the tow cables. But that's a different point. The thing is, all those things, like it can be both. It can be good and I mean, it could. Yeah, you shell out more money, or like if you don't have to, if you want to, you can shell out more money. Yeah. And it's like if they're just gonna add these things and like they're gonna serve, even if they don't always serve a purpose, if it's just something different, because you don't want to always just be staring at the same crap the whole time, right? Like it make like the space battles are so much like, for example, I think of Rogue One, like we have like the what do you call it? They're not stormtroopers, like sand. What do you call them? Beach troops? I don't know. Like shore troopers. I think
they are beach troopers.
Beach or shore? It's one of those two. But like, it's like, finally, stormtroopers are not just blank white. Like they have like this like dope like aesthetic. They look so cool. We have like the dark troopers, or like, what are those the ones that like you can't understand what they're saying to each other? They have like the really dark. Are they dark troopers? Right?
Yeah.
Right. Like you have no idea what they're saying. It's like like their audio is encrypted, which is like so cool. Like only they understand each other. And like all those, it would just be so boring for that battle at the end of Rogue One to just be only TIEs and only X-Wings, right? You have like you have B-Wings and other things thrown in there. And it's just like visually and also like for story purposes, right? I think there's like a Rebels episode about just the B-Wing, right? Being developed, right? And it's like all these things, they just help bring this together. Because if you look at the real world stuff, like every country in the real world has their own like standard issue assault rifle. They each have their different tanks, their different vehicles. I love making model kits. I love model kits. It's like my third hobby. And like, if you've seen like how many variations of real world tanks there was just in World War II, It is ridiculous. Like there's like, you have your Paddens, your Abrams, you have all these other, like all these real world things. So it only makes, so when I see that stuff in Star Wars, I'm like, this makes it much more real to me. Of course, there'll be like specialized units, specialized weaponry, like all that stuff makes sense to me for a galaxy full of billions and billions of like creatures and denizens. So it makes sense. It's like you said, to make money, but I don't mind. I love it.
Yeah, I don't mind either, especially like when we show up on a place like Crate in The Last Jedi. Crate's already such a really unique planet. I love the salt and then the red dust that's kicked up. It's so cool.
Salt.
It's already so inspired visually, but then it's made just a little bit more interesting by the crystal foxes.
Those are so cool. Such a cool design.
Yeah, and now those obviously didn't catch on when the Porgs did. The Porgs were the clear runaway success of The Last Jedi's alien.
Well, they are campaign. The cuter, the cute. Yeah.
But I love just that little hint of life. Here, these empty, abandoned mining facility on Crate, but then these cool little foxes. And then they serve a nice little narrative purpose of, if they can escape the base, so can we. And again, it goes back to like, how can we maybe make the storytelling a little bit more interesting? It could have very well been Joe Blow Rebel is stumbling around and ends up finding, hey guys, look over here. Here's the way out. But instead we get these cool little foxes who, man, let's think about this for a second. Where are they getting out? Let's start looking around, because if they can get out, we can get out. So I think it just opens up these really subtle and interesting moments. So I really love stuff like that.
I mean, I think of the set piece from Empire Strikes Back when we assume they're inside of an asteroid, right?
Oh, of course.
And it's like, there's like Minox, like the little bats are attached to like they freak out Leia when she freaks out in the cockpit and stuff. And it's like, they're outside, they have their oxygen mask and everything. Or like the floor is like soft and squishy, and it's like warm and moist in here. It's like humid. And then they start to put like 2 and 2 together. And then like it's like earthquake, it's like a shake, like the asteroid shake, and like Han puts 2 and like all these clues together and like get back in the ship, like we're getting out of here. And then it's like you have that cool moment where like you see like it's not an asteroid, you see the teeth closing, and it's like, oh shoot, it's a giant ass space worm. Like how cool is that? Like this whole time we thought it was just like an asteroid. Or right now you mentioned like the crystal foxes, like how does that work? Like, what is the biology of that? Like it's basically made of a mineral. Well, I mean, all things are made of minerals, but you know what I mean? It's much more a solid structure kind of thing. I think Revenge of the Sith, when they're on Mustafar and Anakin and Obi-Wan are having their fight, and there's like these guys who are just like scooping lava out with like their like big old like poles and buckets on the end. Like they're just doing like their own thing. They're just like what the hell was that? And they're just going back to work. Like just like, like all these like these beings in this universe who have lives outside of what we see on screen, where we just get small little snippets. I mean, again, I can go on and on about like on episode 1, we have like the Tusken Raiders who are just taking pot shots at the race. And it's like, is there beef there? Is it because they're passing through their tribal ground? Like what, like, I love just kind of letting my mind just go wonder, what are these interactions? We've talked about this before, even with the Mos Eisley, like no droids allowed. It's like, why are the droids not allowed, Abram? Why are they not allowed? Is it because they take up space? Was there a prior kerfuffle of some kind of thing going on? Like, it's just, oh my God. I mean, like I said, even when I don't love Star Wars, I still love Star Wars, man. So can you think of anything else you wanted to add about this, Abram? Because I mean, I have other ideas, but I want to let them percolate while you're speaking.
Yeah, I this sort of like antagonistic relationships you're talking about here makes me think of the book that I started and didn't finish because I have a terrible attention span for novels. That's Tarkin.
Okay.
One of the things that's really interesting about Tarkin is wait, what am I talking about? Not Tarkin. I'm losing my mind. You know who I'm talking about.
Thrawn, right?
Thrawn, yes. I don't know why I said Tarkin.
They both start with T.
Yes, I started off the wrong Imperial track. I'm like, what the fuck am I talking about? That's not right. What's cool about Thrawn is learning that even though he is a badass in the Imperials, right? He knows what he's doing. And he's respected by the Emperor. He's got all this stuff going for him. The prejudice against him in the ranks of the Imperials leads to really interesting tensions, right? Mm-hmm. And it is certainly on the nose, right? I mean, the Imperial stormtrooper Nazi analog is not subtle in any way, shape, or form, right?
Right.
And I don't think Star Wars is maybe equipped to handle this on the human level. but I don't think you should go there with Star Wars necessarily. But I think the idea of exploring these prejudices through the eyes of these alien races is really interesting. And so seeing the Empire, who is basically completely, is it racist or speciesist? I don't know. But like we want people. The Empire is for humans.
They're for the people.
Yeah. But only one sort of person. And seeing them butt up against Thrawn is really interesting. And I think that in the context of Star Wars can really only be explored when it is Thrawn, the alien in the driver's seat of that story.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now when you mentioned that, like, I haven't read the new Thrawn novel, but I know Thrawn through the lenses of like The Last Command and the old Thrawn trilogy and like other like stuff where the Empire. I mean, he becomes a Grand Admiral Thrawn, which is like the highest rank other than being like the Emperor or Vader, themselves.
Yeah,
and like the Empire has always been like very blatant about like how we don't really promote like alien species, like right. It's always but through the merit of just how good of a leader Thrawn is, like it's almost like they cannot ignore how much of a tactician, like how he gets into like these different like species, like their cultures, and figures out like, I don't know if it's in the new novel, but in the old ones, like he would study the art that a culture would produce, and then that would tell him exactly how as a species they think, and he would use like those kind of like battlefield tactics to like outmaneuver them and stuff. And it's like you can't ignore someone who's just that good, so like they almost like reluctantly promote him to like grand admiral status.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of how in Empire, like when they're searching for the Millennium Falcon in the asteroid field and Vader brings on the bounty hunters, and like you get that little chatter between the guy underneath him. He's like, bounty hunters, like we don't need their ilk. Like they're very much just looking at like ugh, like look at these, like, you know, they're not like proper military, right? They're kind of just like, they kind of like, I mean, they're looking up, but they also look down at them like metaphorically, like ugh, we don't need their ilk. Like what? Like why are they here? Like we can do this on our own. We don't need these guys. It's like the Empire is very much I mean, you're right. I don't know if Star Wars is ready for that kind of conversation, but clearly they've been poking at it for like years already. With the Empire is supposed to, what it represents, right? It's very, I mean, stormtroopers, Abram. It's in the language, right? Stormtroopers, like all that stuff, right? So it's an empire and all of that, the war machine, and anyways. But what I think Star Wars does really well with its aliens and such is how it fills out the world, but also how we have like these different languages. For example, if you've ever seen the behind the scenes stuff about how some of the alien languages are taken from like real world languages. I don't know if you've seen some of that stuff. Like,
no, that's super cool.
I forget the name. So you remember how in Return of the Jedi, Lando has the Millennium Falcon, right? He has like this co-pilot with these like flabby cheeks.
Yeah.
Like Niennum, right? Like that language he speaks is an actual real world dialect.
Cool.
It's from some group in like the continent of Africa. I don't remember which.
He's what, a Celestin?
Celestin, yeah, that's correct. Thank you. There you go. That's right. Celestin, right? He has like the little like he laughs. He has like little flabby cheeks, right?
Yeah.
Like that character is so cool. I love that character. But like that language, like it borrows from like real life stuff. There's one more. And I can't remember for the life of me which one it is, but it's like they took a real world language and kind of adopted it for an alien. And I can't remember which it is, but I love how you have like these different, all these creatures, like the idea of the Republic, right? You have all these worlds, all these races who kind of just agree to the idea of having one central, like governing, you know, a government basically that represents them. And we just, like, I mean, we've seen like the Senate. We've seen the Senate so many times how you have like all these like little floating pods, but all these aliens who kind of just come together. And I think that's just so beautiful. It's really cool how Star Wars exists with this. And then we have, of course, the Empire and the eventual dissolution of the Senate and all that stuff, which we'll probably see more of that as we see like more of these Disney Plus live action shows and stuff coming in. But Star Wars has been, I think, as far as I can remember going back as a kid, like probably the first implanted idea of like diversity, like from a racial but also cultural level. Like we think of how when they land on Endor and like these and like Han kind of has like this like oh, they're just like primitive like but then like when they speak through C-3PO, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, they think I'm their god or something. He's like, well, like tell them, like let them go, or no, Luke tells him, right? Tell them to let us go, or like you'll use your righteous. He's like, oh, Master Luke, I can't lie, I can't. It's on my programming. He's like, just goldenrod, like do it right. Like all these species have like a culture, and I mean, I feel like I'm kind of being a little redundant here, but it's just that's what Star Wars is.
Yeah, I love the idea of exploring these different cultures. Like I think about when we talked about the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, and an episode that I think is maybe, I think it's one of the weaker episodes of the show, but one of the more interesting ones when Anakin ends up being basically adopted into this culture and then becomes a white savior, but nonetheless,
basically Avatar.
Yes, basically Avatar, but nonetheless is becomes a sort of a lens into this Star Wars culture that can't really communicate or with anybody, and it sort of just tells us their stories, and we see their sort of traditions and everything. And that is really rich beyond just being set dressing or beyond evoking like, hey, what are the Ewoks eating when the Netherend eat Leia's little like protein sticks or whatever, her little ration kits.
Yeah,
I like seeing that more direct look into things. I think that's super cool.
Now I remember what it was. It's the Geonosian language.
Oh, okay.
The clicks and that I can't pawn
Poggle.
There you go. Poggle the Lesser. Poggle
yes.
the Lesser. That's right. There you go. Right. Like his clicks and like that's I forgot what language it is, but it is a real language. But we go into like some of the Clone Wars stuff where like, don't they revisit Geonosis and like they're all gone because basically the Republic basically just like made them I don't know if they wiped them out or if they made them sterile. It was like something like that, right? Do you remember?
Yes, something like that. What I always remember is the brain worms they find on Geonosis. Do you remember that?
I don't actually know.
They find like on Geonosis in the caves like brain worms that go into what is Luminara's Padawan's name? Starts to be Barriss Offee. She gets like these brain worms in her from Geonosis, and she gets like possessed, and her eyes roll back in her head, they become white. And that's what I remember as a kid from going back to Geonosis. I'm like, this is fucking crazy. I'm
okay.
Scared of it.
In the Darth Vader comic, the one I mentioned before, one of the issues, not the issues like the problem, I mean like the actual paper issues. One of the I don't remember what it is, but Vader goes back to Geonosis, and it's like the first time he's been there since Attack of the Clones, and he goes through like the memories of like when him and Padme were about to get executed, and like it's a touching kind of like, oh yeah, like that's part of him still alive or whatever. But all the Geonosians are gone, and like there's basically one queen that is left, and she kind of creates like a battle droid kind of factory, and she imprints on them basically as like her fellow Geonosians, which is weird. But she makes her own variation of the battle droid, and because like she's like basically the Empire like spread some kind of pestilence that makes them sterile. So they could not repeat, like they could not make more of them. Like another, again, the whole idea of like the Nazification, right, of the Empire and stuff. Like we're sterilizing, lesser aliens or whatever, right? And so that's interesting because, like you said, like they're not really equipped to go into that, but it doesn't stop them from trying because they had that storyline where she makes like a battle army of droids and they're all just like Geonosian substitutes for her. So have that what you take at that what you will.
Andrew, there's really two final things I want to discuss here in this episode. And they're basically completely separate from what you're saying, completely separate from each other also. The first one is more of just like a fun thing. Do you have any favorite alien species that we haven't mentioned yet that you want to shout out?
I really like Rodians, which is what Greedo is. I think Rodians, they kind of have like, they look like flies kind of like their face. They have the giant bug eyes and like the little fly snout. And I just like how they almost always are kind of just like fodder in Star Wars in a way. Like I don't think I've ever seen a Rodian in any Star Wars media that's ever like survived longer than, I don't know, a couple of in-universe hours. Other than, I mean, we see Greedo as a kid, right? in episode 1, right? And then, what happens to him. So I think Rodians are kind of funny. They're kind of like I'm trying to think of the equivalent, but they're just basically just like there just to be kind of squashed or ignored. Other than that, I really like can't remember the name of the race actually, not which is ironic because I like them. The Zabraks. I like the whole spiky. Like the first time when we see Darth Maul, like he just looks like a demon essentially, and it's just such a cool thing. And in that moment in Obi-Wan where he punches, he's like, duh, they have horns. Like, what are you doing? So Zabraks and Rhodians, and then whatever race Kit Fisto is, I can't remember his name.
Yes, I can't remember either, but he's great.
Cool.
He actually, that's funny you bring that up. He segues into one of the ones I want to shout out, which is the Mon Calamari. I love the Mon Calamari.
Oh, how could I forget Akbar? How could I forget?
Yeah, not only do we get Akbar, who obviously classic man. It's Trap. Who couldn't forget Akbar, right? I love Akbar, but I also love the Clone Wars episode, the Tartakovsky Clone Wars episode, where Kit Fisto is fighting for Mon Calamari alongside the Mon Calamari. Mm-hmm. And they're under the water, and we not only see them riding around, but we see them riding these big like serpent guys. I love those. Yeah. And they blow the horns and get the and we hold on the horn and we just see them all swim in and fucking destroy the separatist troops. I love that. I think that's so cool.
They're fighting the Quarians, right? I think they're fighting Quarians.
Yeah, they're fighting the Quarians who are teaming up with the separatists. The Quarians actually, it reminds me of playing Battlefront, to the 2015 Battlefront, or even I guess also 2017 one, and trying to save up credits so I could unlock non-human customizations for my units in Battlefront. I always love doing that. It's a complete non sequitur, but I always think that when I think of aliens. I also think of the Frog Lady from Mandalorian.
I like her.
One of my favorite episodes of Mandalorian period is when Din is ferrying her along to deliver the eggs. And she's just hanging out there, and Grogu's eating the eggs. Kind of makes him look like a shithead, but nonetheless, it's a great moment. I really love that frog character. I
love how like nothing bothers her. She's just so like I'm just like trying to get to my place, and like she's just so focused on her mission.
Yeah, I think she's great. And again, a cool storyline that doesn't really work with. Imagine it was like a human mother, and Grogu keeps like trying to like eat the baby's head. That's not nearly as cute, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's got to be frogs. So I love that too. I think most of my other favorite ones have been shouted out. So I think really the last thing I want to address is sort of the thrust of the conversation for me, which is like, where are these stories that center on the aliens, and why don't we have more of them?
I mean, we kind of get a little bit of that. There's only one book that I can think of that actually does it, and it's Tales from Jabba's Palace. I don't know if you ever read that book, but it's basically kind of just like, it's the retelling of everything that happens in Jabba's Palace, but from the different points of view from the different aliens.
Yeah.
And we kind of get that. Like we kind of see like the Rancor Wrangler. We kind of see like what his day is like. We kind of get Ula's also, like with Twi'lek, we get her point of view. And I think that's like the only, but even then it's like little vignettes, like little snippets. So I think that's the when you said like, where are those other stories? Like that's the only story that's the only, I think, book that I can think of that actually has that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think what it speaks to in my mind again is sort of lack of connection, right? And sort of needing your protagonist to be a vehicle that carries you emotionally through these storylines, right? And you can tell plenty of great animal-led stories, but you gotta empathize with them. And I think obviously Star Wars, humongous blockbuster 4-quadrant franchise. How are you going to get people in the seats, and how are you make the most complex stories? Well, you're probably just going to have a human, and that human is going to be a recognizable actor, and that actor is going to get people to buy tickets, right? Again, I think part of the reason that Star Wars always features human characters, again, comes back to maybe that monetary angle of who maybe you need some actors. You need people to put on the poster. You can't just put Maz Kanata on the poster. It's probably Lupita Nyong'o is gonna move more tickets than just Big Maz. You know what I mean? But I would love to see Star Wars move beyond that, and I think Disney Plus is the best space to do that, really, because maybe the whole David Attenborough thing isn't very realistic, but I like the idea of bringing this sort of Jabba's Palace vignette style narrative to like an 8-episode animated series, where every episode we see a storyline that progresses through the eyes of one of these alien species. I mean, Ewoks got what, 2 seasons of it, and that's just fucking garbage. So give us 8 really well-made short animations, and I think that'd be so exciting, and probably allow Star Wars to explore its universe through those alien eyes in a way that probably the highest tier of Star Wars probably can't.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, like if you go like on Wikipedia, which is basically like the Star Wars Wikia, and I mean that kind of tells you just how much free time I have to like explore random stuff. Like almost every species we look on there has like an entire fleshed out like culture, almost like the Gamorrean guards, like those like pig-like creatures, like apparently they love swearing, they love vulgarity, they think that's cool, like that's like a cultural thing where like they just, and like they're like thick, they're as dumb as like a doorknob, and like that's just how they are, and that's why they're hired as like just to be like grunts and stuff. And so all of that is just really interesting and really cool how they, if you look into it, like these things are kind of fleshed out, but not in a like visual, like a cartoon or in a show, like how you mentioned. Going back to the thing you mentioned about how you were saving up credits to unlock like all these other races. I think that's actually a common thing that I wish Star Wars would kind of move away from, where a lot of these things, like when you're locked, like I'm playing right now, I'm playing Star Wars Squadrons in VR. And it's like a lot of like the cool things or the cool races, or not, in this case, it's not races because you actually do have access to like different like face, even all the options are humans, just different variations of humans. And I'm like, that's kind of boring. But also when I played I started playing a little bit of the Old Republic MMO.
Sure.
And the majority of the races are locked behind like the premium like monthly membership. Like if you're playing the free version, like the humans are like 2 variations of humans. There's like a cyborg one and a regular human, and like you have I think the other option is shoot, I can't remember. Oh, a chiss, which is what Thrawn is, a chiss.
Yeah.
And like that's it. Like you can have like us, like again, I can't remember the name. Ahsoka's race. There's Twi'leks. There's like actual Sith, like pure blood Sith, like the actual race of Sith. Like all these other options are locked behind a paywall, and it's like, man, I wish I could play as those races. And so like when you're saying like, hey, to like save up credits, it's like maybe because we just don't have those options from the get go. That could also be just. I mean, I don't know about you, Abram. When I play most games, I usually pick whoever I think is the most interesting looking, whether or not it's a male or female or another thing. Like if you've ever played a quick tangent, if you ever played Skyrim, I almost never play as a human. I usually choose like the Khajiit or like the Argonian lizard because they have like really cool secondary effects. So I don't know, maybe that's like the thing where, or let me just ask you real quick. You mentioned how Maz Kanata and like how you have to relate to these characters. Do you mean like just from like a physical sense, or like do they also have to like speak English for us to be interested in them?
I think that you probably need both. Like I think that there's probably a reason that the most prominently featured alien characters in Star Wars are both incredibly humanoid and speak English. Hera, Ahsoka, Zeb. Chewbacca really is the one outlier, to be honest. But Chewbacca is also not as central to the plot lines as those other characters are.
Okay. Well, I mean, we are getting an Ahsoka series, so that's one step.
Yeah, but I think she is an example of one that is very humanoid.
Yeah, it's Rosario Dawson. We all know, almost everybody knows Rosario Dawson, so that name kind of helps too, I guess. So.
Yeah.
So we just need to find more English-speaking aliens out there and really spend 8 seasons hyping them up so they get their own show.
I think you make a good point though, Andrew, because obviously it will. We do need that humanoid. I'm not sure if need is the right word, but conventional wisdom and history would suggest that we need these humanoid ones to lead this series if we're going to do that. And I like Disney Plus being the idea of a place to experiment with that. And I like your point about maybe we just need more easy access to them to make them more important, right? Because on one hand, it was fun grinding credits to finally unlock these aliens and being like, oh shit, when I play Battlefront next, I'm going to be cooler than these other people who are just playing as a human rebel. But at the same time, wouldn't it kind of be fun if just everybody could be different aliens?
Yeah.
I like that. And I think the Ahsoka show is a good point. It's not the Porgs show or anything. But it's a step towards bringing I like this idea of like the quote unquote galactic diversity. I think that's cool. So that's another reason why I'm quite excited for the show, and another reason why I'm so excited that Hera, keep saying Hera, why Hera is going to be in live action. That's going to be really cool too.
There you have it then.
Andrew, is there anything else on the topic of aliens you want to touch on while we're here?
Well, would you consider droids as aliens or no?
So
I mean, they kind of are.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That almost feels like semantics at a certain point, because I think droids basically fall into this conversation we're having, right? I would also love more stuff, more media that is dominated by the droid perspective.
Because I think more HK-47.
HK-47, of course, calling people meat bags. We always need more of that. But I think about like Dr. Afra's droids. They're so irreverent and weird. Imagine if we had a whole, obviously this would never happen, but imagine like there is this storytelling leg room here to have like a serial killer show starring these two droids.
Just a 000. Yeah.
Like a Dexter, but starring 000 and the other one. I forgot his name.
Oh, how cool would that be? Like a very unassuming protocol droid. And then like when no one's paying attention, like he's just committing like these murders and stuff. Like, that would be so cool. I would love that.
Yeah, I think that's probably gonna be a bridge too far for how Star Wars tells its stories, but like, that's a great point, because I've always been, I've been compelled by droids always too. I mean, some of my favorite moments in the Star Wars saga star the droids. One of my favorite moments in the entirety of the prequels is when R2-D2 at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith fights off the two super battle droids.
And the oil slick and
watching droids interact, I think, is super fun. And so while they're not organic aliens, I think they open up the same storytelling possibilities as the aliens we've been discussing, though.
They're a what do you call it? They're a special protected class of aliens, I guess you could say.
Yeah, sure. But I would love more droid-driven stuff.
I'm just thinking that like when they kick him, like, you stupid astromech droid, like they just knock him over, and then like he hits him back.
That's actually one of the things that I think makes Clone Wars really fun, is that the droids have more of a personality, because a lot of droids end up being window dressing in the live action films, even though we do get another great droid moment where there's certainly a lot of personality, and kind of to the 000 point, dark personality is when it's on Bespin, right? And on Cloud City, where we see like the droids being branded on their feet, or is that in Jabba's palace? Because
that's on the Sandcrawler. It's Jabba's palace. Jabba's palace.
Yeah, Jabba's palace.
You're right. You're right.
Those three are kind of being linked in my head: the Ugnuts, and then the.
I can see that. Yeah, EV8. I think the droid's called DV8 or something like that. It's like one where like. It's like the one with the very thin, like, fight, where she's like putting the little assigning the different droids like different like positions, like, oh, you're gonna be like, his like translator or whatever. But she's all like, one of them pulls the lever and we see the little gonk droid kind of thing.
He gets branded,
and it's like,
yeah, I think I wanted to say that there was actually like a droid-driven project greenlit for Disney Plus, but I don't know if that's true.
First I ever heard of it.
I feel like I'll do a little bit of digging into that, but I would love, and I'm not talking about droid. I've never seen the show. Have you ever seen the show Droids? Because I've
seen 2 episodes of it.
Yeah,
2, and that was like on YouTube, like a long time ago.
I think that there are an equal number of interesting storytelling opportunities opened up by the droids as there are by the regular aliens. Look this up. Droids show.
Yeah, I know. I think isn't it on Disney Plus? It should be on Disney Plus.
Yeah, that is on Disney Plus for sure. But I thought there's a new one. Yeah, here we go. Star Wars: A Droid Story.
That's right. That's right.
What is this thing?
Once you said a droid story, it clicked in my head. I do remember hearing about that.
Okay. Starring R2-D2 and C-3PO. I hope they made all kinds of weird droids, I love R4 and these other more staple droids, but show me the weird ones. I love speaking of Book of Boba Fett, I think we give a disproportionate amount of criticism too, but I think it also probably deserves a disproportionate amount of criticism. But I love when we go to rescue the fire sprite, and and we end up in the kitchen, and there's a little droid.
The little rabbit-looking thing.
And then the other one with all the arms, the Grievous arms, chopping up the various foods. I love all those droids. They're all great.
How sad that it. How scared would you have to be to imagine to like shut yourself off out of fear? Like, just that's actually cute little. I like that little interaction. It was kind of random, but I thought it was nice. I thought it was cute. I mean, I also just love like the the regular battle droids, the traditional ones. How I keep thinking of how they interact on at the start of Revenge of the Sith, where like after they capture Obi-Wan and they hand like the lightsabers over and like you're welcome. Like he's like so like they're so like you're not being like polite kind of thing. I just love that how they just hand him over and like, oh, excuse me, and like like they're so like kind of just like doting on Grievous kind of. It's just like it adds a little more to, I mean, because they're droids, right? And so you would think they're just machines, but like they try to give them like personality through their dialogue and make them seem kind of wimpy, but also just like I think of when C-3PO gets his head swapped out on Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
And the droid looks down like this isn't the right body. Like what's going on? Like all those like little tiny details of they make the battle droids seem like more than just machine. And I like that a lot.
Yeah, that all that stuff is great. Basically, Andrew, this whole episode is just us saying, Kathleen, more aliens, more droids.
Or like in 6 years, Filoni, more aliens, more droids.
And then he'll tip his cowboy hat, and
I love that cowboy hat.
yeah, it's very iconic.
Yeah,
I would wear a Filoni cowboy hat,
like his own brand of like his own line of like produced like cowboy hats or something.
He should start selling design. Dave, write this one down because I know you watch. Designer cowboy hats,
like a Cad Bane style, like
yeah. Or just one that's covered in like a Babu frick, like various Babu fricks. I would love that.
I can't wait to see more of him.
Very, very, it's peculiar that we're seeing more of him, but you know, it's actually funny. Before we wrap up the episode, Rise of Skywalker really gave us a lot of droids and aliens, which is interesting. We get Dio, we get Babu Frick, and then we get the guy who was clearly important before the movie was rewritten and re-edited, the big slug guy. What's his name? You know what I'm talking about? Who's on the Millennium Falcon?
Big slug. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, who is that guy?
I don't know who that guy is.
He's just there, and like we're supposed to know like who he is already or something.
Yeah, and I was like, "Who the fuck are you?" He's the golden dice of aliens in the sequels.
Like, you guys know. It's like what?
Give me a golden dice show.
I love that little Dio though. That one's cute because it's just a simplistic design. It's literally just a wheel and a head. Like it's funny. I like that.
He's just two simple machines stacked on top of each other.
And he's like so important somehow. Like there's not like a not like a what do you call it? I think of the. Never mind. It's not important. Forget it. Forget what I said.
He is certainly a plot device.
I was trying to think of the word from the Spider-Man movie when they call him a the term he has for like basically like a plot device. There's a word he calls him. You want to talk about? He's like, oh, do you have the it's not a thingamajig, but it's kind of like a thingamajig.
Oh god, UMP.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, UMP's fucking scoring a point on MSWS right now. God damn it. I don't know. I know what you're talking about though. From the Tom Holland ones, right?
No, from the Spider-Verse movie. We call it like he's like, oh, there's always a thing. There's always a
fuck.
It's like a jibber. I can't remember the name. The point is
a jibber jabber.
No, that's not the right term, but clearly it's a very important like MacGuffin. You know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Not the red herring. What's the other term? There's like
MacGuffin's in that term.
MacGuffin, thank you.
But
they call it something else. No, they call it something else.
Spider-Verse name for a.
And then Miles is like, "Oh, I broke it. It's the little thing that he needs." Goober? Is it a goober?
A goober.
Yeah, it is goober.
Yes.
Okay, that's what it was. Finally, when you figured it out, something I figured it out. It's like, oh, where's the goober? Like Dio's clearly like the goober thing kind of thing.
Yeah, and the knife and Chewbacca and we'll save it. We'll save
another
it.
day. Another day.
I've been thinking about Rise of Skywalker a lot recently, but that's a conversation for this time. Andrew, anything else you want to share on these topics before we call it a day?
I'm thinking. Oh, whatever Sebulba's race is, we need to see more of those.
Sure.
A Doug. I want to say it's a Doug, right?
Yeah.
He calls him a Doug. Dugg. Bring those guys back.
I want to see a Sebulba game all about just grabbing things with his tongue Because doesn't he
with his tongue. I think
doesn't he eat the chicken in you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think he uses his tongue though. Doesn't he grab it, or I don't know. I think of tongues. I think of Jar Jar.
But there's is it Jar Jar? Yeah, you're right. It's Jar Jar. I want to see a Jar Jar game where you just grab things with his tongue.
That sounds like a point and click like mobile or something, like a Fruit Ninja kind of thing. I don't know.
Sure.
That's all I got. Avery.
I think we're going off the rails, Andrew.
Again, I'm more than usual. So yeah.
But Andrew, it's been a great conversation. A little loosey goosey here, just chatting Star Wars. We'll be back very soon, actually, for Kenobi. It's already the finale next week.
I'm very excited.
But as of the time you see this, who fucking knows? Because I'm going away for a week. I can't edit this for the next week. I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows? You're going to see this at some point in time. You see Kenobi review at some point in time. Apparently, Andrew, 90-minute season finale of Kenobi.
I don't think that's actually. I think part of that is a QA though. I've seen a lot of people have pointed out. A lot of people have pointed out that about like a good 20 minutes of that is probably just QA. There's like a Q&A section or something.
Sure, that's too bad. But
I don't know if I would want to know an hour and a half long Obi-Wan. That's not too long, I guess. That would be cool.
I would have liked 6 hour-and-a-half long episodes of Kenobi.
I mean, that would just basically be the entire series. If you think about it.
Andrew, say the line so we can get out of here.
May the force be with you.